everyone. I'm Hillary with Phoenix Books. Welcome. How many of you have been in this space before? Impressive. How many of you have shopped at Phoenix before? I love it. Well, one of the things that we really love at Phoenix Books is supporting local authors. So we are so thrilled to have Bob sharing his book tonight. If this is your first visit to Phoenix, our bathroom is downstairs. If you need to use it, a bookseller at the bottom of the stairs can assist you. We also have cookies and drinks over there, so please help yourselves. We're going to leave enough time for audience questions at the end, so if you have any burning questions for Bob or Jennifer, just ask. Here we go. Robert, sometimes known as Bob, has been part of the Colchester, Vermont community for most, if not all, of his life. Born the 6th of 6, he has spent his years honing his many creative talents. He's a small business owner, photographer, musician, and now adds published author to his resume. Robert has written many short, emotionally moving stories throughout the past, and with the motivation of his mother's supernatural tether, she inspired him to tell the story of a life well lived in the planted seed, a book of hope. Joining Bob tonight, we have Jennifer Gennari. She's the author of Muffled, My Mixed Up Berry Blue Summer, and Stifled, which comes out in September. Her middle grade books have received honors. I love the cheering button. Her middle grade books have received honors, including finalist for the Georgia Children's Book Award, an American Library Association Rainbow title, and a Bank Street Best Children's Books of the Year selection. A graduate of Vermont College of Fine Arts, she offers individual editorial services and works as children's book editor for Rootstock Publishing. A Colchester High graduate, Jen spends her time between Vermont and the San Francisco Bay Area, which doesn't sound terrible.
That's true.
Jennifer and Bob have known each other since 1979.
Yeah.
So we're thrilled to have you. Bob is going to do a reading. Jen's going to ask him a question or two, and then we'll open it up for you. And then, of course, we'll head downstairs. If you still need to purchase the book, you can purchase it there, and they will sign it. All right.
Thank you so much. We're really thrilled to be here. Thank you all for coming.
It's so good to see so many familiar faces, and some strange ones too. So I'm going to read a story of a chapter in this. It's about my mom's faith.
Before you start, can everybody hear us okay?
Yeah,
In
so
the back?
far, yes.
Okay.
If you need me to bell her, just let me know. Like many children of that time in this part of Vermont, my mother and her 12 siblings were raised in the Catholic faith, where Sunday morning Mass was a central part of the family's religious routine. The only exception was my grandfather. Alan attended church with the family only on special occasions, weddings, funerals, and holidays like Christmas, Easter. He believed that God could hear his prayers just as clearly from the three-legged stool that he sat on to milk his cows than from a wooden church pew. From attending Mass weekly to Mom attending Catholic school, starting at 14, where most female graduates became nuns, it was clear that her faith was an important part of the fabric of who she was and who she would become. As Mom and Dad were dating, the day came when Dad had to ask Alan for his daughter's hand. My grandfather stood firm on his daughter's beliefs and wishes. He told my father that he would need to convert from Protestant to Catholic in order to wed. My father took classes and fully converted a month before their blessed day. Each of the 6 children that were born were all baptized Catholic, and from an early age were required to attend Mass each Sunday. By the time I can remember this ritual, the church was Our Lady of Grace, just a short walk down the dirt sidewalk. My mom would dress us up in all our Sunday best to make a good impression before God and the community. As a gift, or a bribe if we behaved ourselves. My father would stop at the store across the street from our house and buy a dozen assorted donuts. These delectable pastries were indeed heavenly. They became as much a part of the Sunday routine as church itself. Most of us grew older. As most of us grew older, my mom's rule was that you needed to attend Sunday Mass until you were 18, and then you could make your own decision about what you believed. Belief was strong with Mom, but not with the kids, not so much. One by one, we each found our own unique way to slip out of church early, usually right after communion. To us, even me, when I was young, church was boring. Same old, week after week. So I followed the rules, and by the time I turned 18, along with a disillusionment with priests, I exited the only organized faith I ever knew. There was something special about my mother's faith. It was unwavering and inspiring. If you were in that mindset. My reintroduction to the Christian faith came shortly after Mom's diagnosis with cancer. At that point, her health had become too fragile to attend church. She asked her youngest, who lived across the street, to do her a favor. "Bobby," she said, "since I can no longer go to church, can you go with your father? He and I would certainly appreciate it." Since it was just 45 minutes a week, I agreed, not because I wanted to, but because I felt an obligatory favor to my mom. The first Mass I attended with my father, he of course wanted to get there early, so my designed 45-minute favor turned into an hour and 15. There was something different about that Mass, but I kept any optimism to myself. That weekend, I had a conversation about faith with somebody I truly respected, and confessed and shared my thoughts. She said, "You can believe the message without believing the messenger." Those words still ring true to my soul. After a few weeks of going to church with Dad, did two things I never expected. My father and I grew closer, and I found a new messenger I could believe in. His name was Father J. During this time, I was considering all the contradictions I had about faith. I spent a lot of time reading and contemplating. It was a walk that had me stumbling from time to time, yet also had me freely running down a soft grass-covered hill, soul smiling. Father J had a lot to do with that. Growing up in a culture of Catholicism was about listening and committing to memory what you were being taught. One had no input, and questions were not only frowned upon, but you could have ended up getting struck with a ruler across your hands. And those nuns knew how to do it, so you never asked another question. This never worked for me. I was a simple kid, but I liked to ask questions. As I got older, I began grappling with the question of faith. I would turn to my mom or read on my own, but I always responded better to face-to-face conversations. Father J seemed different. After a Mass one week, I walked up to him and asked him a question. I knew I was taking a risk based on my past experiences, but somehow it felt safe. He took time to answer my questions, no matter how simple or seemingly insignificant, and encouraged follow-up questions. After several weeks of attending with my dad, I said to him, "Dad, I really like Father J. He seems to genuinely care about my understanding of faith." My dad replied, "He's a good man. You know, he has cancer, just like your mother." "I didn't know that," I said. "And did you know that once a week he comes to visit your mother? They have lunch together, he gives her communion, and they share cancer treatment stories." My emotions overtook my physical composure. I awkwardly tried to appear calm and collected, but inside I was anything but. In that moment, Father J felt like a messenger for me. and I never would have encountered him if my mother wouldn't have asked me to be my dad's spiritual wingman. Living across the street from Mom, I often sat with her on the screened-in porch, continuing conversations about life, how she was coping with the changes to cancer and the treatments were having on her body and her being. She was facing something far more difficult than I could ever imagine. Yet her faith was her faith in what was destined for her somehow brought her comfort. I kept going to Mass with my father, asking Father Jay more and more questions and sharing my spiritual growth with my mother. Something that I could tell made her smile from ear to ear in her soul.
Thanks, Bob. That was really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that with us. I'm going to ask him a series of questions, but he is a storyteller, so we'll probably go all over the place, and I don't know if we'll follow the script. But I just want to say that in the first story in this book, because we just heard a little bit about your mom and what an amazing woman she was. And in the first story, you describe your mom's life on Poor Farm Road, and she was so dedicated to her education that she ended up being kicked out of the house at like age 16 or something. And I'm thinking it was 1949, 1950, I don't know, something like that, which really speaks to her inner strength in defying expectations. So I want you to just tell us a little bit more about her strength, if you have a story you want to share.
Oh my God, there's too many to offer. She just, as I say in the book, she knew right from wrong and never was easily pushed to the wrong side of that line. No matter who it was or how much she may have felt threatened, what was right, and she wasn't gonna walk that walk. That particular chapter, my grandfather asked her to make bread, and I'm sure she's going, really, me? There's 13 of us, and you're asking me. And she was studying for an exam. It was actually her senior year, and my grandfather said, if you're not going to do it, then get the hell out of my house. She said, gladly. She left. She moved in with my Uncle Buddy in Winooski. She never went home. Wow. It was just because it's the right thing to do. She was working on being a better person tomorrow than she was today. But she also, there was also fun stuff. When we were kids, I'll share one with you. I have a sister-in-law who's a great person, but she has different parameters of what she thinks is right. So my mother, every Thanksgiving or Christmas, she took great pride in getting the table set just so. And on each plate, she would put the name of the person who was supposed to sit there. I'm not sure if any of your families have ever done that. Well, my sister-in-law, who was fairly new to the family, thought that she wanted to take control. So she went in there and she changed all the names around. Well, she got spoken to rather shortly by my mom, and she never did that again.
I want to ask you there are really funny stories in this book, a lot about music, about fishing, especially when you're a kid, but there's some really hard stories, actually, even about donuts and alcoholism. So how did you decide what stories to use in this book and how to put it together?
Well, my friend, Jen, after I sent her the first chapter, she said, I think one of your lines was, your mother sounds like an angel. Is there anything that other than angelic stuff you want to say about her? And I said, no. I think my response was, she was an angel. And but in the chapter that you're talking about, you had told me to really dig deep and find those things that. So, long and short, this was a very emotional write, and it really helped me clear up a lot of the things that I had been hanging on to for a lot of my life. And this particular one was my father, who worked at IBM, and he was a mechanic. what he did. He fixed everything. My grandfather used to joke he could fix a broken heart given half a chance. And he just didn't have the tools to handle being a management level person at IBM. He wasn't really good at filtering the BS that came down from above. So he would bring it all home, and if one of us kids were stupid enough to do something to flip that switch, well, practically we got the switch for doing that. And but for me, you know, I was very fortunate to have a mother who always gave me the there. You know what a there is? When you rub your head, it says there, you'll be okay. And in that particular chapter, the there's were a donut and a cold glass of milk.
I think I skipped this first question, which perhaps we should share with people, because how did you decide to write this book? You should tell that story, the process, and then I want to know a little bit more about, do you write every day? You know, did you revise? Talk a little bit in case there's some aspiring writers in the room too.
How did I come to write it? It was edicted to me. I didn't have a choice. 3 years after my mom passed, you have to keep in mind, as you read the books, you'll understand that we have an ongoing dialogue, even still. Not as much now, but even still. And so 3 years after she died, she came to me and she said, you know, that story that I shared with you, the meaningful part of life and blah, blah, blah. I'm saying blah, blah, blah on purpose, by the way. It would be selfish for us to keep that just for our family, that this message needs to be shared with more people. And I said, I couldn't agree more. She said, you need to write a book. And I said, no. I said, I like to write short stories. I don't dig the long version, you know, stories, songs. That's my thing. She said, I said to her, I said, I had a brother at the time who was a published author, historical, Kenneth degree. If you ever want to read his stuff, it's published by the Vermont Historical Society. And I said, well, you know, Ken could write this. I don't have to write this. And she looked at me and she said, Bobby, this is your book to write. So it was at that point I felt like I didn't have a choice. So I said back to her, I said, would it be okay if I wrote it before I died? And she said, that'll be fine, but you need to make that a solemn promise. And I did, and I just hope that it's not a precursor. But do I write all the time? Yes. Every day I write something every day. I can easily write between 10 to 15 short stories in a week. Wow. And I kind of use the Bob Dylan approach. I don't know if you've ever heard this, any of you musicians out there, but Bob Dylan always said that you should write 5 songs a day. Every day. And sure, some of them are going to really suck. But when you're writing that many, there's guaranteed to have 1 or 2 that's going to be good. So that's what I do every day.
So throughout the book, there are voices of other people remembering your mom. Why did you decide to include those voices?
I wanted it to have a clear perspective of who she was, not just a biased version based on my love and my belief in her faith. It had to be, she was all about family, and I just thought the people who got and wanted to be a part of this book were all like family. So it's really a better way of telling the story. It just didn't want it coming from my mouth or my heart. I wanted it coming from Ann's heart, and I wanted it coming from Brad Chafee's heart, and I just wanted to have that dynamic there.
Yeah, it works. There's like interludes from other people. So, as the youngest of 6 kids, you struggled to sort of find your place, and And I wanted to ask, did you think of yourself as a writer when you were
Never.
younger?
Never.
I think we already knew the answer to that one.
Yeah, no, I was,
But were there any teachers that encouraged you?
no. Matter of fact, they felt, I got to like the 4th grade, I think it was the 4th grade, and that's when they start throwing books in front of you. You need to read this, you need to tell us about that, and a big book report on here, and tell me what that means in the bigger picture of life, and I just didn't get it. So I wouldn't read it, because most of the time it was books like Little Women. I'm trying to think of the one with the mosquito, on the islands, the Lord of Flies. And I would get probably 3 pages into the first chapter, and I would go, I'd rather go play ball, or grab my guitar, or any number of things rather than read. So no. And plus, on top of it, my family always thought of me, and this is not, I'm not looking for any sort of sympathy. My family always kind of thought of me as the simplest of the 6, the dullest light bulb in the package, sort of thing. And so there was never any confidence in me that I would do anything remotely as enlightening as write a book. That would never have happened.
But you wrote songs.
Yes.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the songwriting? Like, where did that come from?
My heart. That's the only place it ever come from.
Which actually leads me to my next question. Your father thought you were too emotional, and you described yourself as a soft-hearted kid. But in her 70s, your mom said it's great to stop worrying about what other people think. And have you embraced this? If people know Bob, he gets very emotional.
I would say that this book has helped a great deal with me to expose all of those things, and then magnify them, look at them from both sides. One of the things that somebody told me not a long time ago, I found it out within the last years, one of the greatest qualities that a writer has is to be empathic, is to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So as I wrote this book, all of those things that ate away at my belief in myself, my self-confidence, my everything, I kind of tore apart to be able to look at it more objectively. And so I think there was a lot of healing that happened within the pages of this book. And so I've forgiven a lot of people. And, a lot of people that I had hurt feelings from have now passed. So you have to come to a clear understanding that most people don't hurt you for no reason. They have some things in their pocketbook that they haven't quite dealt with, so they sometimes impose it on you.
I was actually thinking more about you being sensitive, which is, a quality that people sometimes think boys aren't supposed to have.
Well, that's true too.
And I think you've embraced, you're comfortable.
Yeah.
with that now.
Dad used to call it a detriment, and as I gotten older, I embrace it as a gift.
Yeah. Okay, so over and over, there's a message of acceptance and love in all of these stories, and so I was just going to ask about that faith, that message that you have is a big part of this book. I don't know if you want to say anything more about it, because I realize you read that chapter already, but if there's anything more you want to add about that message of acceptance and love.
I don't know. It's something that I truly has become part of me, which is, it's not, I don't necessarily call religion, I call it faith. I call it belief. And I believe that, without giving away the message, I believe that here in this life, we're tasked with learning how to love. Excuse me. And the most important thing is by loving more, we increase our capacity to absorb love in what's next. Here and what's next, really. And love and hate is a choice. I choose love every minute of every day. There's nothing, as my sister said, if you want to be a jerk or a mean, nasty person, you have to wake up every morning and choose to be a mean, nasty, awful person. I wake up every morning and say hi to my mom, and I choose to love, choose to embrace it, choose to forgive, I choose to accept, I choose all the basic thought processes and beliefs that most of the great religions or faiths in the world have. What did Buddha say? Buddha said something like, one candle can light 1,000 candles and not lose any of its life. So why can't we love in that realm? Why can't we love? We're not going to take anything from us if we spread love to everybody, just like the candle.
Let's open it up to questions. If anybody has any.
I have a question, Bob. You mentioned that you write often, you enjoy writing, you do it every day. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the process with this book, because in some respect it sounds as if this is a little bit like Muhammad writing the Quran, that your mother was speaking through you to do this. And so can you reflect a little bit on how much you felt was directly from her, how much was your interpretation, and perhaps critically, how much you revised as you went along or going back and forth?
Well, I think I can answer that this way. My friend Janice, who's sitting here right in the front row, always tries to tell me that the things that I write are great, and this book is great. And I go, what do I say, Janice?
A lot of things, but go right ahead.
She said, I tell her all the time, I'm just a conduit for my mom's message. It was easy to write because it was a story that already happened. You know what I mean? But it was, the better part of it was diving into those emotional threads that tied both of us together and trying to build something that was real and that people could relate to. Matter of fact, there's another little tidbit you might want to know, maybe you don't want to know, but Jen was huge in this book being written. The story goes, and this is accurate, when Mom told me 12 years ago to write this book. And I wrote the first chapter and then believed that I had no right writing this book. I had no gray matter strong enough to be able to convey the message that she wanted to convey. I had no right to write this book. So I had that first chapter. I'd done all the research, I wrote the chapter, and then I sat on it until, 2.5 years ago?
I think so.
When Jen came to one of my bluegrass shows. If you don't know, I'm a bluegrass musician too. So Jen came, we caught up after not seeing each other for years, and I said, oh my God, you're a famous author. And she said, oh my God, you're a famous musician. But the following spring, she came back and in her new house down in Colchester, and her dishwasher didn't work, so she called me. And I fixed the dishwasher, and when I was done, I said, hey, I know people probably ask this all the time, but would you read a chapter or something that I've written? I really kind of want to know if it's worth anything. If I'm good or if I suck. I really just want somebody to tell me that's not connected to my family if it's worth anything. So she said, sure. That'll be $10,000. No, she graciously said she would read it. I sent it to her on a Monday. Tuesday, I didn't get a response. Wednesday, I didn't get a response. I began to say, she hates it. Thursday came, no response. Friday, no response. It was the most troubling week of my life because I was trying to figure out what was next. And Monday morning, I got an email from Jen Gennari saying, you've got me hooked. I want to know what happens next. And knowing my lack of life's self-confidence, I responded to her, so, should I continue to write? And then she came back to me, yes, you have a natural storyteller voice.
I did say that.
And it was at that point that I started writing, and I finished it in the following April.
Well, the rest of the story is that I am busy, and he's like, can I send you a chapter a week or a month? And I said, no, you have to finish the whole thing. Email me when you finish the whole thing, and then I'll read it. So.
And then I did.
And he did it. Yeah, he met the deadline.
And,
Your own deadline.
Yeah, and I texted her, I sent her an email and said, I'm finished. And I was so excited, and she said, you need to go out and celebrate. Which I never did. She said to me, and I advise anybody who wants to write a book that's in this room, I'm going to give you the same advice she did. Writing even a rough draft of a book is a big deal.
Yeah.
Needs to be celebrated. It's just been a magical journey, and I can't think of a better partner to have walked that path with than Miss Jen Gennari.
More questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
The bluegrass guitar player, I played a lot of music with. He taught me, he wrote a song called Open Up the Gates and Let Me Through. I've done all the praying a poor boy can do, open up the gates and let me through. Has those lyrics changed over the course of time since you've written this book?
No.
No.
No, I remember telling my dad this. It was kind of, when I wrote the song, it was kind of a strident thing, like, screw you, I'm going to get into heaven, and just open up those gates and let me through. But it also was me going through a process in my head of what I try to do, and I think the first line is, boy, now you're going to get me. Anyways, he goes through learning that lying and hurting people is not a good thing. And then he has a wife who doesn't treat him very well, but he tries his best. So he's trying to, basically the name of the song is about telling God, hey, I tried this. This is what I tried. Please let me in. But if you hear the word sung, they actually kind of come across as being demanding to God. Just let me through. But speaking of that, I remember John the first time. John is Jen's husband. John and folks. John and Jen live in, which I had the honor of visiting their beautiful houseboat in Sausalito, California. And the first time you came to hear us play, you said to me something to the effect of, you were a word guy. You caught every word and phrasing and all that stuff. I was just so impressed by that. You're like, I like that phrase. I like that phrase. So I just wanted to say that. Yes, yeah.
Well, I have a couple questions, but the first one is, and you've already talked a little bit about this, but in the beginning, the very beginning of your book.
So you read this book?
Several times. Well, I'm a book and a half, and I've read it once already. Yes.
Okay.
You know that. But you did make the little comment that this is your story from how your perspective, because you didn't want to speak for, you weren't speaking for your siblings or anything?
Siblings, aunts, uncles,
So
people
how
who have
have-
seen this differently.
How have they received the book?
I haven't heard anybody yell or scream at me yet. My sisters, one sister has read the book completely, and she believes that it's beautiful on multiple levels. And I get occasionally I'll get an email or something, a text, and it will. So far, I haven't had somebody tell me that it sucks. But I have come to understand that we all are a kaleidoscope, we're all different parts of the whole, and none of us are always exactly where somebody else is at. So we have to accept that person and love them nonetheless.
I have a question. You talk about this being a book about faith and your faith. During the process of writing, did your faith change at all, or develop?
No, it just
some?
intensified.
And where?
It became more believable. How's that for a weird thing?
And are you still attending church?
Yes. Yeah. It's so funny when not the Catholic church. That stopped after my dad passed, or in that ballpark. But I regularly attend so that I can keep asking questions, and that was the weird thing for me growing up in the Catholic Church. Was, as I said in that chapter, was they never let me ask questions.
Yeah.
They didn't. I want to hear this. This is something silly. During this whole thing, I asked Father Jay, why was Jesus' last name Christ? Now, everybody should know the answer to that, but here I am, a 50-something-year-old person, and any other person of faith would have laughed at me. Father Jay said, Bob, that wasn't his last name. That was his identifier. The Christ is the chosen one, blah, blah, blah. But he did that without a chuckle, without going, man, you're stupid. And that's what I like about my faith now, is I can question my faith and ask questions about my faith and have discussions about my faith without them being shunned or told I can't do that. If I can, Jen, I know that you're the timekeeper. This is one of my favorite stories. So I started reading the Bible a few years ago, just because I'd gone to a men's conference, and I came back and I was all jazzed up about the Bible, and I went to my dad and I said, Dad, because we had this big old Bible that the church sold, all padded, this big by this big, that sat on our table, coffee table, and we saw it every day. Big picture of Jesus on it, and it was strange. So I got home and I was like all excited. I said, Dad, I have a question for you. Did you and Mom ever read that Bible from cover to cover? And Dad said, hell no. She said, wow, that just blew my mind. So I had this intention to read the Bible. So I started reading it, and I'm on a flight from Phoenix, when I was playing baseball, Phoenix back to Philadelphia, and I'm double doing it. I got the Bible in my ears, and I got the Bible in my hand. So what I'm hearing, I'm reading, and that's usually the best way for me to absorb things. And this little old lady who's sitting next to me, say little old lady, I won't say her age. She's 153. But she's sitting next to me. She was a teacher in Philadelphia, and her husband was a teacher in Philadelphia. They're sitting beside me, and I'm just by myself by the window, and I'm reading along. She taps me on the shoulder. She says, "What are you reading?" I said, "I'm reading the Bible." She said, "Oh, that's interesting." She turned around. She started talking to her husband again. And I don't know, probably 15 minutes later, she tapped me on the shoulder. She says, "Do you have some time?" I said, "Kind of stuck in the seat here." And so she said, "I have some questions." So she asked me a handful of questions about faith. And I answered them truthfully and honestly from what I knew. And she said thank you, and she turned around. And just before we landed in Philadelphia, she stopped and turned around and said, thank you for answering those questions. I've been going to church for 30 years, and nobody has ever answered those questions for me. That's, you know, I want this book to be an understanding of what my mom showed me, which I'm not going to go into. But I also want it to be about love and understanding, and I think that's, you know, if I say at the end of the book, I don't care if you believe Jesus was the Son of God, just a prophet, or a long-haired hippie who believed in love and acceptance and forgiveness. Jesus is a pretty decent human being to follow. So I just like, man, he was cool. You know, he didn't judge people. He didn't say this person is bad because he's this, or she's bad because they're that. There was always an acceptance and a love, and that's the type of faith that I really love. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I got one for you, Bob.
Uh-oh.
I won't swear at you this time either.
Yeah, she called me a name the other night on page 10.
When you write daily, do you think about what you're writing, or are you just writing whatever comes to mind?
Great question. Before I answer that, I'm going to just say I feel honored to be in the same room with two great writers, Miss Cronin back there and Jen here. I feel like I'm just a young whippersnapper in this thing, but it's so funny. Maybe it's a gift, maybe it's not. I had a customer. I was at a customer's house I don't know if any of you are on my YouTube channel, but I had a customer who I've gone and fixed his appliances for years, and he's a beekeeper. And so I was up there fixing something for him, and it was his birthday the next day, and he said, I don't know how you write so well. I really like your stuff. My wife and I watch it every Friday night. And he says, how do you do that? I said, give me a topic. I'll write a story for you for your birthday. This was a Thursday. Friday night, I had the story of Beekeeper. The story of Beekeeper Bob and his relationship with his queen bee. So I don't know how it happens. I just start writing and something comes out. I don't need to be not specific, but that's what happens to me.
So your mother
Yes.
asked you to write this book,
Mm-hmm.
and you did.
Mm-hmm.
Since you've written it, you've held it in your hand, you shared it, has she in any way come back to you, spoken to you, and said, you did it, job well done, or anything specifically from her that helped you feel like you connected and fulfilled that wish for her?
I think the night of the big release at my house, there were many signs that led me to believe that she was there and she was happy. Most of which my sister, this is really weird, so some of you may have heard this story. My sister-in-law, who lives out in California, Fairfield, whose time is different than ours, right? I didn't talk to her about the gathering at all and how the thing was going to go and stories or whatever. For those of you who were there, you know what's going on, but for those of you who weren't, at the end, toward the end, I read a chapter called Music, and in that chapter, at the end, there was a video, an audio. I recorded my mother and I playing a song together. And if you get the book, when you get to the end of that chapter, there's a code you just put in your computer on YouTube and it'll pop up and you can see all the pictures of the family and all that stuff. Anyways, so my sister-in-law has a dream the morning after that gathering. And she calls me up. It's about 11 o'clock our time, about 8, 9 o'clock your time. And she said, Bobby, I have to share something with you. I said, what? She said, I had a dream last night that I saw your mother and your father, and they were in this green field, really, really green. And your mother, I was focused on your mother, and she just was the best she's ever looked. And she just seemed to effervesce joy and happiness. And then, the dream, she broke into that song that I played the night before. So if I can't think of any other way that she could say, well done. Sorry about that.
It's all right. What I want to ask you if you're going to write another book.
Several. I have two right on that are kind of mostly done, or for three really. One's my New York story, and then I have one about one that's called The Path, which is it takes into account the 15 to 18 people. I keep increasing the number, 15 to 18 people in my life that have crossed my path, sometimes even without an interaction, that have made me the person who I am. And the moral of that story is never discount anybody, because anybody is a positive connection towards your future. You never are the same. You meet somebody once, they have changed your life forever. And that's what this book is about. The New York story is its own little story, because when I lived in New York, I had an understanding that there was somebody I was supposed to cross paths with there, that I was supposed to be the person that was going to impact their life forever. So every person I came in contact with, I was trying to figure out a way to lift them up rather than to tear them down. And I'll tell you one very short story about that. It's not going to be short. I worked in an appliance store in Brooklyn, New York, and I was the most naive person who ever lived in New York, so they had to have a handler for me. And her name was Nicole. She swore like a pirate, and she could let it fly like nobody's business. So anyways, one day, one of the delivery guys came in. He had delivered a washer to his uncle, and he broke it. So he came in, boss man, I broke my uncle's washer. And I'm like, no problem, tell me what's going on. He did. I said, it's an easy fix. Let me show you on the washer on the floor. So I grabbed a Phillips head screwdriver and I took out one screw. He said, boss man, you lost me. I'm no good at this. He said, would you go help my uncle? And I said, tell him I'll be there Friday after work. Now his uncle was an older man, probably in his late 70s, early 80s, and his wife, and they had their grandson with them. So anyways, I was going to that house. Before I left the store, my handler, Nicole, says to me, where are you going? I said, gonna go fix Kenny's uncle's washer. She said, like that? And I had a suit and an overcoat and my briefcase. And she said, you know where Kenny lives, right? I said, yeah, he gave me the address, no problem, I know where it is, I can get there. She says, he lives in the projects. And I said, yeah, no big deal, I can handle it. And she says, well, I think you need to think this through a little bit. And I said, no, I'm all set, I'm okay. So she goes in her office and she comes back out and she gives me an umbrella. I said, what the hell do I need this for? It's not raining out. And she kind of looked at me and she said, are you that effing stupid? And I had no idea, because I didn't think like that. So I go to this house and I meet Kenny's uncle and his aunt and their grandson, Joseph. And Joseph is, I really might think that he was the one I was supposed to help. he is like tied to my leg. Every screw I take out of this washer, he's going, "Oh my God, that's so cool!" And then when I finally take like the whole shroud of the washer off, he's just like gobsmacked. He couldn't believe that it came apart. And I put it all back together, and his grandfather hands me a $20 bill for my time. And I give it back to him, and I said, "I'll just settle for a hug." So I gave Kenny's uncle a hug and his wife a hug, and I gave little Joseph a hug. A couple weeks later, people started coming into the store asking for the guy who fixed washers for hugs. Well, that's going to be an upcoming.
There you go. Something to look forward to. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob, and congratulations.
Yes.
It is such a huge project to write a book, and you have done it. And I
Thank you.
think